TZA back with you. Thanks for joining me. Today I wanted to take a look at Modal Electronics Argon8 synthesizer and just give a bit of an overview, share some of my thoughts and feelings with you all, and hopefully you can get some useful info about the synth. I might be able to help share some tips with people on some of the things about the synth that aren't obvious at first, and hopefully it's informative and helpful for those that might want to actually are looking at maybe buying an Argon8 or owners of the synth already that may not be aware of some of the useful functions that this synth has. And I guess I'll just start with an overview of like what the synth is and what it's capable of, and then I'll probably dive into some sounds I've made with it. Obviously you just heard something new, and yeah, I've been sort of really inspired and getting quite a lot of patches made with this, so hopefully not too distant future I'll have a sound bank that might be worth sharing with everyone, so we'll stay tuned for that. But yeah, okay, so Argon8 is a wavetable, 8 voice wavetable synth, polysynth. It's sort of got a small form factor, it's 3 octaves on the keyboard, and it's quite sort of simple. I'll just shift the camera so we can have a good look at the instrument as we go over it. Just bear with me while I get this right. Hopefully we can see most of the interface. If I get that in, I think you can probably see most of it there. Apologies for not quite being able to capture the entire interface. It's just basically doing this with my phone, so I'm not the most professional YouTuber, but just bear with me. So as you can see, 3 octaves on the keyboard, and the interface is up here, and you've got pretty sort of straightforward architecture really. Like, it's the oscillator section, you've got a filter in the middle, you've got your envelope section, LFOs over on this side, and then there's your sequencer and arpeggiator linked together. These are here just modulation sources and just overall settings for the synth. And then you've got effects, 3 effects slots that you can use as well up the top here. And I'll probably just talk a bit about the synth and what I like about it and what I feel it could probably, well, some of the shortcomings, I guess. So it's generally a very nice synth. It's got a very nice sound, I think, for a wavetable synth. It's not, not sort of brittle and cold like many other wavetable synths I've used tend to sound. It's got a kind of round, sort of warm character, and that's nice to have with the wavetable, because it gives it, I feel it gives it a bit more capability to just be more diverse in the sort of sounds you can coax out of it. It's sort of more convincing if you want to make more sort of, I guess, analog-esque types of sounds. I mean, it's a fully digital synth. There's no analog circuitry in there, so you may find that it's not for you if that's not really what floats your boat, but I think it's a nice sounding synth regardless. There's lots of good features about it. It's very, really well laid out. It's one of the biggest strengths, I think, is the interface and just the way it's laid out. It's got, well, almost all the controls you can access on the panel, but it's not quite one knob per function. It has a shift sort of function for dual controls on each encoder, so it's besides that point, it's really accessible and it's intuitive and easy to get around. And I found like in the short time I've had it, I'm really like mastering the interface and just being able to produce sounds quickly and efficiently, and then get to the parameters I need very quickly and just knock out sounds like it's just simple, which is really good. It's a really good point about the synth, because a lot of these kinds of synths tend to have a lot of options and parameters that you can get into and get bogged down with and get lost in. So it's kudos to Modal for just having this really nice interface. So there's that. I think just take a look at the oscillator section up here. There's two sort of oscillators that are combined for the oscillator section. So you've got wave 1 and wave 2, and each of those have a selection of different wavetables that you can choose from. Just put my headphones back on. So yeah, you can select from a whole range of different wavetables. I'll just clear this patch. We'll make a niche patch from the start. So starting from clean slate, you have just a sine wave, and that's on wave 1. Now you can mix between the two oscillators, and then you can stack the voices as well. So you can stack them for poly sounds and have unison for monophonic sounds, so they're bigger, and there's this spread parameter which lets you detune for that nice sort of rich beating detune sound. Yeah, so you do have the wave morphing feature through the wavetables, so you can choose different wavetable for instance. It's nice and smooth, and yeah, you can blend between the two like I was saying. So really nice interesting feature I think is this oscillator mod parameter and feature set, so you can select from a range of different functions there. So you have like amplitude mod, frequency mod, ring mod, wave shaping, and oscillator sync, and so on. So you can get to those other kinds of oscillator type effects, and it's really quite capable and sounds nice. So it's a hard sync, for instance. Yeah, so there's a whole bunch of different ones in there, and it gets really interesting, I found, once you start combining the different wavetables and then the modulation. So I'll show you, for instance, I found Oscillator 2 has a few extra wavetables at the back of the bank, so you have like a pulse width modulation, clock noise, and there's also sine noise and square noise, which sort of interpolate from a sine or square single cycle through noise. So sorry, so that's clock noise, and then the sine noise goes from sine, gets dirtier and just turns to noise, and then sort of filters out. But then you can combine that with the os mod. So if we go back to this phase mod selection and then go back to blend oscillator 1 back in, and then increase the modulation. Glitchy kind of artifacty. So that's pretty neat. The pulse width modulation is pretty nice. This oscillator 2 only has the pulse width one. But again, with the oscillator modulation, it does some really crazy shit. So back to just oscillator 1, but so as you can tell, it's pretty rad. You can get into these wave modifiers as well, so each oscillator has these additional kind of wave modifiers, and they are fixed settings that just sort of alter the timbre of the wavetables somewhat. They're not really extreme, so they just tend to just add a little bit of a different colour to each wavetable just from the standard. So they're quite useful, just to sort of expand the palette of the oscillator. So as you can tell, it's quite diverse. It does really nice kind of VA sounds like sine wave, and then you can detune them, and then the spread actually goes up into like intervals, so you can set third, fourths and fifths and octaves, and then you can modulate that parameter as well. So that's just for instance, but then you can end up, you know, once you combine that with sort of a different tuning on the oscillator, you can get sort of really big just chords with single notes pretty much. So there's a lot of scope there. I think one thing with the oscillators that sort of bothered me a bit was wave 1 not having the additional wavetables. There was a couple of times I wanted to mix two oscillators, I think, with different pulse width modulations sort of playing off against one another, and just couldn't do it. And then another time I think I had like a sort of a wavetable and oscillator 2 that was really nice working for me, and I wanted to get noise, and because the other oscillator doesn't have the tables, I couldn't do it. So there's a bit of a limitation, and like it just means you've got to sort of think a little bit about the sounds that you want to create beforehand. Just give it a bit of pre-thought and can pay off. Otherwise it's, yeah, pretty nice oscillator. And I think actually there's a workaround I did find with wave 1. If you have it in the VA mode and then the oscillator mod, set it to this inverter setting. It has this setting or mode called inverter, and it basically turns the oscillator into a it stacks, like if you put it into sawtooth and then adjust the oscillator modulation, you get effectively, I think it works as if there's two sine waves with one inverted sort of against it, and you end up with this pulse width modulated type sound. So as you can hear, so that's just a neat trick to bear in mind if you sort of want to get pulse width mod with oscillator 1. I think I'll move on from the oscillator. It's, you know, pretty much covered everything, and we have the filter in the middle. There's 4 modes of, it's a state variable filter, and there are 2 standard modes, you have a notch and a bandpass, and then there's classic modes, whereas the same as a bandpass, and then there's a notch mode. And they sound pretty similar. Like, they don't sound too bad for, you know, typical digital filters. They sound pretty smooth. There's not really any noticeable stepping or artifacts, which is nice. Crank the resonance right up. Sounds nice and smooth. And then in the standard mode, I think it's like the resonance is a little more prominent, and when it's up, you can really pull the harmonics out a bit more than the classic mode. So it has a bit more of a ring to it. But yeah, it sounds pretty nice. It's pretty straightforward. Moving on from that, well, actually there's a morph mode. It's been a state variable. You can morph from low pass through band pass or notch, depending on the mode, into high pass. So that's nice, and that's modulatable. So it's room for, you know, possibilities there. The envelopes are pretty simple. There's 3 envelopes on board. 2 of them are fixed, so you have the amplitude and the filter envelopes that are fixed, and then the third is a modulation envelope, which can be assigned to all the different modulation destinations. Well, not all of them, but many of them. I'll come back to that in a bit. There's another one of the synths kind of shortcomings, I think, but it would be nice if the envelopes, all 3 of the envelopes, were assignable. Because that is, your modulations are going to be all tied to the one envelope time, which can be somewhat limiting. The times themselves on the stages of the envelope are somewhat short too, in my opinion. I think they, particularly the attack and decay, could be longer in times for producing longer, slowly evolving pads and soundscapes. They tend to fall a bit short for the application. So I don't know if that can be something Modal can address maybe in a future update, but that would be a nice welcome addition. Just, you know, a little bit longer on those envelope times. Otherwise, like, they're pretty straightforward, just ADSRs, and you have the depth control as well. From that, I guess we'll look at the LFOs. There's 2 onboard LFOs. The first one is a global or monophonic LFO. The second one is a polyphonic LFO, which means each voice as you play has its own LFO. And they have a series of different modes you can assign them to. Re-trigger each time you press a key, so it starts the cycle over, or you can have it freely running, or the single cycle mode where it will just play through one cycle. And they're also morphable, like the shapes can be morphed from sine through triangle and sawtooth square, and then into stepped random. So that's quite neat, but I guess I was wanting some smooth random and couldn't get it. That was one sort of shortcoming I felt with the LFOs, but you can get like sample and hold style step randoms, which is nice, and you can have some control over the kind of like the range of the random. LFO2 actually has a higher range on the rate, so you can get further into the audio range, but once you get into the rates are tied to like the harmonic series, and I guess just to demonstrate, we'll assign that to we'll just assign it to the frequency of oscillator 1. So you can hear that just going through the different divisions of the harmonic series. So then we'll just back down into low frequency oscillations. So it's quite neat for audio rate modulation, and you get some cool effects when you modulate that when it's running at audio rates. Now, I guess we'll talk a little bit about the joystick and the other modulation assignments. Joystick's quite nice. It's got a nice feel to it. Fair bit of resistance, which is nice to use. I sort of don't like how it's tied to, the pitch bend and the mod wheel or mod controls are tied together in the joystick. It's sort of weird. Like sometimes I'll go to use some modulation and then end up bending the pitch unintentionally, which sort of gets a bit annoying, but working on that, and I think it's something you probably get used to as you play with the synth and joystick more. The modulation matrix itself, I think, is a little bit lackluster. It's got 8 slots, and they're easily filled up with modulation. You need to sort of think, as I was saying earlier, you need to think, pretty hard about what modulations you're going to assign as you make a sound, because you are limited to the 8 slots, and I kind of have come up against it a few times, wishing there was even just a couple more slots, maybe 4 slots, so a total of 12 would be really nice. And excuse me, I think it would just really allow you to finesse the patches, add that sort of detail to the modulations, which sometimes it's hard to get. And the other thing I sort of was getting at before, like with the envelope, some of the modulation parameters, or like modulators, don't modulate a lot of the destinations. Like you'll get a message come up saying invalid modulation destination, which is kind of limiting and it gets a bit frustrating because it seems to come up a lot. Like particularly this mod envelope, you can say, for instance, put on an effect and then go to modulate, say the dry wet, for instance, which would be a pretty sort of straightforward modulation routing, and it's just invalid. Like it won't let you do that. There's quite a few other sort of modulation destinations that I would like to be able to use. Like LFO2 is similar. I can't modulate, I think it must be just the effects again. So yeah, you come up against that LFO2 trying to mod, say, the rate of LFO1, it won't let you do that. But you can go the other way, so you could have LFO1 modulate the rate of LFO2, which just seems strange that they don't let you. It just doesn't give you the full scope of the modulation that you would sort of expect. Some of the other parameters that would be nice to modulate would be the wavetable banks. Like if you could modulate through the different banks, I think that would be nice, but you can't. You can only modulate the wavetable. But never mind. I guess we can look at the sequencer, where is a nice little sequencer on it. I think it functions more like a looper, actually, like in my opinion. But it's, it's sold off as a sequencer. It can be up to 512 steps or 8 bars, and it just records and loops around. So I think as you can hear, it's sequence already stuck in there. Now it has 4 animation lanes, which is pretty neat actually. So as you're recording, you can tweak different parameters on board, and they get assigned into these animation lanes. I'll start a new sequence and just sort of show you. So you can hit record. So there's a basic little sequence there. It's not much chop, but just for demonstrative purposes, we've now assigned the cutoff on the filter to the first animation lane. So as you can hear, that's locked in. And we'll add some resonance. So you can see how it's pretty neat. And then I guess we'll do the filter envelope. The depth of the filter envelopes being assigned. So right, let's sustain. You get the idea. It's pretty neat. One cool trick I think I found is can be a bit of a workaround for extra modulation. If you need it and you're not using the sequencer, you can use the animation lanes in an empty sequence, and you can sort of use those as a loopable kind of modulation. So for instance, we'll clear that sequence again. Just get back to here. Clear the notes out, and then play. You can still hear that the parameter animations. Sorry, I was just trying to work out where that noise actually was coming from. I think there's something funny going on with the oscillator. Oscillator 1. This is interesting. So there's no oscillator modulation, but there's still something going on there. FA2. to the oscillator modulation in there. Alpha 2 to the pitch, so that's what it was. So it sort of shows you, I guess, a bit of troubleshooting, unintentional, but there you have it. The arpeggiator is pretty cool as well. That's also down with the sequencer if you turn that on. Pretty straightforward, as you can tell. You can go through different modes for different stepping patterns and that, but one thing I like about it is if you hold the up button, you can tap a sequence of notes. You can get that just from holding a single note, and then if you add extra notes you get these interesting patterns, and it's easy to clear it. You just hold a single note again, hold the button, and back again. So that's pretty cool. And then you can also just record that straight into the sequencer also, so play with the envelopes. So you can see it's pretty easy to dial in the sound, and yeah, it's cool to play with. Yeah, I guess I'll talk a little bit about the effects. There's a bunch of different effects. There's 3 slots, and you've got all the usual suspects: delay, reverb, phaser, flanger. The tremolo is quite useful because that's pretty much the only way you can get sort of modulation over the amplitude besides the envelope. So you don't have any kind of amplitude modulation control. So you sort of have to do with the tremolo effect in the effects settings. There's a whole bunch of different presets for all the effects in there as well. If you just push all those, you can scroll through a whole bunch of different effects. Where'd they go? Yeah, so you got bit crush, phaser, ping pong delay, and so on. Yeah, there's a whole bunch in there, and then there's a bunch of slots you can save your own. And up with the effects, there's this other parameter which is a distortion, which is separate again from the 3 effects slots. So there's a distortion on it pre-effects, and then that's doubled up like with when you hit the shift button. That parameter is also an effects kind of level or balance to how much of the signal you want to feed into the effects slots. So more or less like a dry wet pre-effects. And then there's also on the effects, each one has its own dry wet as well. So I guess it's pretty sort of useful to know about these two in sort of getting your gain structure right, because it can be you can easily find with this synth that if you effects it all the way into the wet, you'll lose gain. Like for instance, I'll put the reverb on because it's a good demonstration, but if that's all the way into the wet, you can hear we've lost a lot of gain there. So you can use this pre-effects level to bring back some of the dry signal and bring that level back up. And then also the dry wet in the effect, just to give you that extra bit more gain. So you can still hear the effect there, but it's just not getting, like the sound's not being drowned out. So it's sort of pretty important, I think, to bear in mind. Now, lastly, I think I just want to say there's this patch gain control, which it's not quite obvious on the panel, but you see here by holding the patch button and then adjusting the main volume parameter, you can get access to this patch gain, which lets you just, it's designed for adjusting the levels of your patches to make them more even. But I found I use it a lot just to bring the level of the patch up overall, because it can be quite low, especially if you're not using unison or stack modes on the oscillator. So you get a nice level with the patch gain. Pretty much about it. I guess I can show you some of the sounds that I've made with the synth in the short time I've had it. So just this one makes use of the glide feature, so more sort of straightforward poly synth patches. More sort of string like poly sounds. Don't mind my keyboard playing, I'm not that great. This Quantum Express is just sort of a wacky rhythmic patch I put together. A lot of oscillator modulation and modulation of the effects with a fair bit of random. I did run out of effect slots in this, modulation slots, sorry, on this one, so I wanted to add modulation to the decay time. So as you can see, it would have been nice to have, but it is what it is. Now I think I have a few other patches that are kind of based on synth sounds from some other artists that I admire. Of Canada. And we've got sort of a nice deep kind of saw lead. So a bit of joystick action. nice kind of wavetable pad. It's an interesting kind of adding some glide with the joystick. What else we got? Sort of a chip tune up. Just sort of similar. There's a nice kind of wonky bent pad. Interesting kinds of psychedelic sound. So as you can tell, you can get a pretty interesting range of sounds out of it. Little bass line. Sorry about the thumping on the keys. The mic's pretty sensitive. Just increase the stack so we can get a bit more gain. I'll bring that patch gain up and see how that is. Yeah, it's pretty low. So that's what I was getting at before. Some of the patches really need this patch gain. So that's probably about it, really. Hope you've enjoyed this overview. Thanks for joining me again, and hopefully I'll have another video up pretty soon because I've got a bit of free time at the moment. If you have any questions or comments, queries and all that sort of stuff, you can feel free to leave them in the comments. And if you like what I am doing, check out some of my other vids. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. See ya.